Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. This is the Clutter Fairy Weekly for September 5th, 2023. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, certified professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. The Clutter Fairy Weekly is the webcast and podcast that digs deep into the clutter that piles up between you and the life that you want to be living. We explore the habits and behaviors that lead to clutter, and we suggest strategies to slow the accumulation, reduce the collection, and comfortably manage the stuff we decide to keep.
If you're new to our Zoom meeting, we want to let you know that you can share your comments and questions via the chat, and I'll try to make sure Gayle gets to them before we move on to another topic. You can also use the raise hand feature if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question yourself via audio or video. And we are also streaming live on Facebook, so you can share your questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. We're going to start by talking about last week's Weekly Tittle, which was called An Unstoppable Force or an Immovable Object. The assignment was to explore one tough decluttering decision to see what it can teach you. Let's hear from our participants in Zoom and on Facebook. Who tried the tittle this week? Please let us know in the comments. YouTube viewer and my friend Kay came up with her own tittle for this week. Kay writes, "Your grandmother's teacup is not your grandmother is exactly what I needed to hear today. I am also almost the end of the line in my family. This episode will help me get through the rest of my boxes that remain from our move 9 months ago. We've targeted Labor Day weekend to try and get it done or close to it."
I hope you're able to make some headway over the holiday weekend, even if you didn't get all the way through it. It's definitely a burden being at the end of the line and feeling like you're making all the decisions for all the people who came before you, but they've passed the right of decision making down to you since they've opted to not do any of the processing work when they had their turn to handle the stuff. In my mind, if they've surrendered the opportunity to evaluate and to process things when they own them, then you now have full rights and privileges to do as you wish when it's your turn. It's enough to manage your own things that you've acquired directly yourself, much less having to deal with all the things that 4 generations before you acquired. I say make the decisions you need to make without any burden of guilt for what you choose to do, and your ancestors will not haunt you. They probably are watching over you and feeling guilty right now because they're like, wow, really should have done some of that and not send it all down to the next person to do. So make your decisions and don't feel guilty.
Regarding the quotation that Gayle repeated, your grandmother's teacup is not your grandmother. For anyone who didn't get a chance to watch or listen to last week's show, I want to give proper credit by mentioning that Kay was referring to a quotation from Andrew Mellon that we shared in last week's show. After the show, I searched for the exact quote, and I found a blog post Mr. Mellon wrote in 2021 in the aftermath of a couple of natural disasters. I'm not sure whether this was the first time he used it or if it's appeared in, he's written at least one book. It might be in one of his books.
Yeah.
Here's a longer excerpt from the blog post I found. "Recognizing the stories we tell ourselves and others about our belongings is the first step in separating ourselves from them. It doesn't matter if the separation is initiated with or without our consent. It may be simplistic to point it out, but here it is. Your grandmother is not a teacup. And we do a disservice to the memory of her when we try to reduce that memory down into a series of objects that inevitably will get lost, broken, or otherwise fade away. Not to mention how difficult it is to contain a lifetime's worth of memories in a single teacup. Better to make a cup of tea and tell someone about your grandmother's significance in your life."
I love how he explains the dilemma of keeping stuff as holders of memory. It's very well said. And thanks again to Kay for the reminder. We're going to share a link to that blog post in the show notes for today's episodes. So if you want to go read his full article, you can. But he does a great job of explaining that object is not your grandmother and attaching all your memories to that object and then being distressed about whether or not the object stays with you. It's a lot of burden to place on an object and a disservice to the memory of the person who you're trying to remember. Clearly, if the person is that important, you're going to have all kinds of memories, even if you had nothing to remind you of them. all those memories already exist in your mind. So anyway, he did a great job of explaining it, and we wanted to exert it here so you could listen to it again.
Naomi says, a mighty accomplishment. I replaced the socket on a lamp that has been sitting waiting for repair since before COVID. I feel so manly.
Rock and roll. It's like always great to get those little projects done. Thank goodness. So proud of you. I know. And it's like, it's the simplest thing, and it probably didn't take a really long time, but it's so satisfying when it's been sitting there mocking you. Repair me, repair me, repair me for 2 or 3 years now. And here you are, and you got it done. So we applaud your accomplishment. Good job.
Ginger reports, finally had to get the neighbor to come fix our broken toilet seat. I bought one seat. It was chipped when I pulled it out of the box. I returned it and bought another one. It happened to be the wrong size. So the neighbor had to fix the old seat, which had a broken bolt. I'm so tired.
But it got fixed, and now it's off your chore list. So thank goodness. Good job.
Here's a report from Connie. I've set aside a set of dishes from our first apartment to give away at Bazaar.
There you go.
Stopped looking for the right person to give it to.
And you know what? You can just imagine a whole story in your mind about who's going to get those dishes. Take them to the bazaar and let somebody, let somebody collect them. Let somebody buy them because they need them. And you don't have to know who that person is or what their story is. You can just assume somebody that desperately needs them is going to take them. And you can just have that story in your mind. And it's as good as any other story you could have about it. So,
right. Instead of looking for the right person to give it to, just accept that the right person is going to get it.
Right. Just trust and have that story in your mind instead.
Paula reports, I made an appointment to take clothes into a consignment store. Haven't consigned before, so it will be interesting to see if they want any of my clothes and if they sell.
All right, come back and tell us how the process went and what did you find? Because I'm sure other people will be interested to see what it was like for you. They could use that data, so come and share it with us.
Mavis shared, I had a paralysis when trying to decide on car boot sale items. For the Tittle, I decided to try again to make decisions and managed to fill a box full of priced items, joyfully to my shock.
Yay, good job. And so now you have to go to the boot sale and, try to sell some of those things out of the trunk. Good luck. Can't wait to hear how it goes.
M worked the Tittle and she reports, I learned that I feel very insecure from suddenly being alone in the world from the deaths of my loved ones. I have finally cultivated some friendships, but it still seems too scary to get rid of things I might need, in quotation marks, especially since I've had to use some of my stashes since no longer being able to get out on my own.
I can see your side of that. I can see why that would be a little nerve-wracking. And the only question I would have is, are those stashes, can you live with them comfortably? Are they impacting your ability to function well where you live? And if they are, then I would try to thin the stashes down, even if you still keep all of the types of things that you're keeping. Maybe you keep a little bit less of everything, or find out if there's some redundancies in your stashes. If something can be used in more than one way, then maybe you can get rid of some of the things that are single use. I'm just wanting to make sure that if you feel like you need to keep them for now, fine. And just make sure that they're not impeding your ability to be comfortable and safe in the house. That's the biggest priority.
Samudra reports, I did some work on a project that combines art, organization, and tech. It's not finished, but it's just this side of printed, and it'll eliminate several other objects. And I learned a lot working on it.
How cool. That sounds like a good project, and good for you to be learning something new. Can't wait to hear how it goes.
Paula says, Grandma's Not a Teacup always makes me laugh. The only item of my grandmother that I have is a teacup and saucer. I think in that case, we can definitely make an exception. And
you can have the one teacup, right? Teacup. That's not you on to 57 million things. So good job. It's funny that is his example.
There are more great comments, but we must move on to our main topic because once again, we have too much to talk about. We promise we are not going to turn this into 3 episodes, but we definitely
Right.
have more than enough for today. We talked last week about how some categories of decluttering and organizing are harder than others. We started exploring the sources of the difficulty to see whether we might find some fresh insight to help face those problem areas. Today, we're going to examine more problem areas and the factors that make them so challenging. And we're going to see if we can come up with a few ideas to help you face those challenges.
So this topic and the survey we posted for it raised a lot of interesting responses, so many that we couldn't even cover all of them in just 1 hour last week. So we invited our audience members to take the survey if they hadn't already done so, or to respond again if they had more challenging areas they wanted to talk about. And in answer to our first question about the categories of clutter that you find most difficult to work on, getting more survey responses shuffled our top 10 lists, but only a little bit. So here's how the new top 10 list looks. Here's where we shook out. Number 1 now is photographs. Number 2 is personal papers. Number 3 is family heirlooms or inherited items. Number 4 is financial paperwork. Number 5 is hobby, art, and craft supplies. That's a good one. Number 6 is items associated with a person or relationship. Number 7 is reading material. Number 8, mementos and souvenirs. Number 9, materials associated with unfinished projects, like the lamp that she just changed the part out for, right? And then number 10 is clothing, including shoes. So it's interesting that paper in one form or another holds 4 of the top 10 lists, 4 spots of the top 10 lists are papers. Photos, personal papers, financial paper, and reading material. And then even some of the mementos and souvenirs might also be paper, if you think about it. And there's potential for paper and some of the other things. So clearly paper is one of our big challenges from our list.
You know, for those of us whose art or craft is on paper media.
Oh, right. Paper based.
Yet another category of paper.
Yeah.
I'm looking at them now. The half-used sketchbooks and the
your little art corner over there with
not
artwork.
Quite finished drawings.
Exactly.
Finished drawings that haven't been delivered to people yet. More paper.
Yeah, but you keep working on it. So we also asked our audience to list any categories that we hadn't included in our list for ranking. And we shared a few responses last week, and we're going to take a deeper dive into a few of them later in the show. Here are some of the new responses we received this week. Items that you bought together with someone. That was one that was like, oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Because then you have that whole, we both bought it, and that means we both have to decide it's time for it to go. That ups the challenge level on that one. Another one is the leftovers, stuff carried over from previous rounds of decluttering. There's always a little bit of leftover. Bits and pieces, defined as small, random, one-off items. Bulky items are always a problem because they represent the things that are large and difficult to move on to the next place, right? They require people or movers or a dolly or something that a specialty item to get them out of the house. Items from a business retirement, office supplies. Everybody has too many office supplies. Items related from former interests like sporting goods and trophies from back when you were into doing that sport, and maybe you're not doing that anymore. Inherited business and legal paperwork. I run across that a lot, right? Where people inherit their, their spouses, their parents, their grandparents, business paperwork, legal paperwork, and then they feel like they don't know enough to manage and make decisions about it, and that hangs up people a lot. Plants, including inherited plants, emails from friends, and a multi-category pile. Yeah, a multi-category pile is always one that needs to be broken down. So y'all came up with some great categories of things that are challenging. My favorite one on this list was the items that you bought together with someone else, because that's like a whole nother level of negotiation required, right?
Our original survey question, the next one was, for the stuff you find hardest to organize, tell us about how or why this type of stuff trips you up. There were so many responses that discuss problems that everyone can relate to. We're going to pick up our discussion from last week right where we left off. And the next category was stuff for which you need the right kind of help. Glenna said, I'm an artist who doesn't have my space in order to do my projects. My house is large enough that space shouldn't be an issue. My friend has worked to get studio space set up, but then she was sidetracked with other paid work. I've not done much since. I seem to work best in sticking with it when she's here working. I guess I need the buddy system.
It's a lot of the reason why I have a job, because people can't focus long enough without a partner. Relying on being self-motivated and self-monitoring can fail unless you're a disciplined person. Working in a team builds an accountability and the awareness of others, while working alone means you have to self-monitor and self-report. We found that a lot of our viewers use our videos as their buddy while they work. They play it in the background and it helps them feel supported, and it builds in accountability. You can even have a text or a video chat partner, just so you can say you're going to work on something, and then you have to report into them about how it went. You can get creative about how you can buddy with someone to give you that motivation and support. I have heard from viewers that they call their friend and say they're going to work on something, and then they go work on it, and then they come back afterwards and say, this is what I got done. You can do that by video. You can go in Zoom. You can do FaceTime somebody. Even just sending a text. I started on the project. I've got this much done. I took this many bags out to the trash. I mean, just having a little bit of, I report what I'm doing, and then somebody comes back and says, good job, you did a great, that's fabulous, so glad you got it done. Just that little bit of momentum and feedback can be helpful in terms of keeping you focused. It's not unusual that, because I've said this before, we think of it as everybody thinks of decluttering as a chore except me. So you need somebody else around that can help you stay focused on the chore.
And a lot of our participants have mentioned FocusMate. Some people have had great success with FocusMate.
FocusMate is an app.
It's a website. I imagine it has an app. I was looking at the website version, which is focusmate.com.
Cool.
And it's free to join. I don't know the ins and outs of how it works. I think that they do have paid tiers. There may be there's some limits probably to what you can do in the free version. And that's about all I'm going to say about that, since I haven't really explored it. The next challenge that we want to talk about is health issues that create limitations to energy and mobility. An anonymous respondent cited mobility issues, poor health, incredible fatigue, physical and mental health issues, lack of stamina, lack of more than a couple of good hours in a 2 or 3 week period, overwhelmed.
For somebody with this many physical limitations and that short of a window of good hours, if you can only muster a couple of hours a week to focus on something, it's truly beyond their capacity now to do that work. This needs to be a job executed by somebody else now. If you're someone who can't physically do the work anymore, finding a way for someone else to step in and take the work over for you is the true task before you now. Spend your very limited energy on lining up a trusted person to do the work for you and to answer their questions and make decisions so that they can work for you. You can be the person who they can ask, what about this? What's your thought about that? What's your instructions about that?
Yeah.
And let them go do the work.
And that can be a professional or volunteers or a friend, a family member.
Yeah, any of those things. It just needs to be somebody that you feel safe with and feel that you trust that they're going to come and do the work and generally follow your instructions. You can't be a super uptight when somebody's doing something for free for you. So it's one thing if it's a professional organizer and you're paying them, but if your volunteer is a volunteer, then you have to be a little bit more flexible about what they can do and how much instructions they have to follow exactly and that kind of stuff. But if you've reached the point where your physical capacity is so limited, you really just need to spend your energy on finding someone to come and do it for you, because expecting yourself to do it is kind of a losing battle at this point. you don't have enough stamina. And we all know that decluttering and sorting through stuff and organizing and then delivering on the choices that you made. I have to take this to the trash. I have to take this to recycling. I have to take this to donation. Those are all chores that require physical capacity to execute. And so if you can't do the basic steps of organizing, decluttering, and donating things away, taking the trash out, then trying to make yourself do it is a losing battle. So you really need to concentrate on finding someone that can do it for you.
Okay, let's talk about the problem of familiarity.
Mm.
Glenna says, I also have 3 rooms that are so filled with stuff that I can't use the space. There's storage space for things rather than rooms for me to enjoy. This feels yucky, and I've gotten so used to the clutter that it's just become background noise.
That is the result of overwhelm. The result of that is the result of being super overwhelmed like that is that blindness and shutdown. We ignore what we can't deal with ourselves. And when the landscape has grown beyond our ability to easily manage it, then we start to block it off in our minds. We mentally pretend it isn't there. But this takes a lot of energy and it generates a lot of guilt and shame. But it is what we do. When we feel overwhelmed, when we don't know how to move forward, we sort of go la, 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 and we pretend like it's not there. And you're just putting a whole lot of energy and going la, 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 and turning away from seeing it. And then you kind of accept that room that's completely blocked that I can't go in. You just sort of wall it off in your mind. And it's a room that you don't think about. You don't think about being able to use it. You don't think about how it could be supportive of your life or important in your life or used in your life. And we just sort of like surrender it to the stuff. And being overwhelmed is always, it's always a struggle to get over. But in that situation, she said there's 3 rooms. And, I would pick one. Pick the one that you think you could get the most benefit out of if you could uncover it, if you could dismantle it and start trying to chip away at it. Because accepting that those 3 rooms are not usable is a surrender point that can be reversed. And so, yeah, they haven't been usable up till now. Like right now, they're not usable, but that doesn't mean that they can't be made usable. And so I know it's overwhelming to think about it, but pick one and let's dive in and see if you can't reclaim it.
It also sounds like this would be a good candidate project for your strategy of taking a small bite. Go into one of those, whichever room you've decided to tackle first, and bring out one manageable chunk, a single box, or even one handful,
right? Exactly.
And take it to a space you've set aside for this purpose, and sort that one bite,
and see how much of it is going in trash or going to recycling or can be put in a donation box. It is possible to clear it, and you don't have to do it all in one sitting. And any room that's completely full, 100% you can't do it in one sitting. Like that's just by definition, right? So it is a project that's going to require more than one visits, more than one, focused time on it. And it's worth it to reclaim a space so that you don't have to surrender all your house to the stuff. The stuff doesn't get to own your space. You can take it back from the stuff. Right?
Here's a great comment from Samudra that we all need to hear. Forgive yourself for what you can't get done.
Yes.
You didn't get it done, so you're going to carry it over to tomorrow's to-do list. Don't also carry over the bad feeling
right
about it, not finishing it today. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can do part of it today, and if you do part of it, it's still a win, right? Anything counts. Everything counts in the Clutter Fairy environment. So if you can get something done, then that is the part that you get to cheer about. And the rest is just waiting for you to start another day. We'll be here cheering for you. Sorry.
Several survey respondents gave us comments that I grouped together under the heading of lack of knowledge or a sense of uncertainty. Peggy said, not always sure what needs to be kept, especially related to 401k mail or legal anything. And then an anonymous respondent said, I don't know who to give it to. And then Vona shared, Having a system where I will be able to find things is a challenge for me. I put things away and have tried everything, such as labeling. If I can't find stuff, I just go and buy another one, but I have to quit doing that.
Yeah. Let's start with that one. You do have to quit buying another item because that just increases the density in your house. You're making it harder to find things by filling it up more. I suspect that the volume in your house is preventing you from finding things. One way to help is to pick an area and dig in to remind yourself what all is there. Pull things out to see what you've stored there, refresh your memory, all the while looking over what is stored that you truly don't use or need. We put things away so that we'll have them. But if nobody can remember 100,000 items they have in their house, like there's so many things in any one given house that you can't possibly be expected to remember them all. But if you go into a specific cabinet, drawer, closet, and stop and filter through them to remind yourself what's there, to see what you've stashed, then you can use the process of refreshing yourself about what you own as also a decluttering path. So if you're in there in the closet and you're looking at all the things that are there and you start seeing things like, yeah, I'm never really going to use that. Oh, I was looking for that. Now I remember that it's in this closet. You can remind yourself what you own by going and touching it all instead of stashing it and then expecting yourself to drag the memories of all of the contents of the closet back into your mind someday when you need something. That isn't how it works. So refresh yourself and use that refreshing process to filter and find things that you're looking for. And hopefully it will help you thin the volume, and then you can stop buying extras, and that labeling process might be more useful to you.
Anita said, I started a do not buy list for things that I have a backup of.
Oh, there you go.
And a where is it list for when I stash something in a place I don't look in frequently.
Right. Sometimes people will put lists on the inside of cabinet doors or in a drawer. If you feel like it's all stuff that you want to keep and you want to be able to remember where it is, remember what's in there, you can make a list. Now that does presume that you will read your own list. So
right.
don't go through the process of making a list if it's not something that you're ever going to look at. If you're one of those people that will only look at, you only remember it if you see it, then you're going to have to go in and out of the cabinets and look at the contents to tell what you own.
It occurs to me that another bit of advice for Vona, it might be pay attention to what you're buying. If there are any particular types of stuff that you find yourself rebuying because you don't know what you have, start there. If you're constantly finding, you bring home a new cleaning product, and then when you go digging around, you find that you already had one, then get that focus there, get that category into order.
At least go and look and refresh yourself what you actually own. Get under the cabinet and pull stuff out and see what's there. Just so that you'll have that picture in your mind when you're in the store and you're like, no, I don't need any more Windex. I have 5 bottles of Windex already. It'll be okay. I will say that Peggy wrote the comment about she's not sure what needs to be kept, especially related to 401k, mail, or legal anything. And I will say that if you feel ignorant in an area of your home or financial life around the paper, we often feel panic over what is and isn't important. It all seems really important. If you don't really understand what it is or what it says or what they're trying to tell you, then it feels like you don't have the full understanding to make a good decision. And so then we err on the side of caution and keep it all. This is one of those things that I think, depending on the category of stuff, if you have a 401k, it might be worth, and you're getting a bunch of mail, it might be worth it to talk to the financial advisor about, okay, I get this kind of mail. What does it mean? How long do I need to keep it? Talk to somebody that is an accountant or somebody that is who does your taxes, and let them give you some guidance about what kind of stuff to keep. Tell them the types of paper that you're getting and decide, let them coach you through the categories of paper, if that would help. just learning and understanding what those things are and what they mean will give you a little bit more comfort in making the choices. And if you don't feel like you have enough knowledge yourself and you don't feel like you can learn enough without consulting an expert, then go and consult the expert so you don't feel uncomfortable about it. Even if that expert is somebody in your family, like, if you ask somebody else that you feel like has a better understanding of this stuff, they can at least help explain some of the things that you're getting so that you'll feel more comfortable at making choices around it.
Yeah. One thing that you might get related to retirement accounts is prospectuses, which are documents that companies are legally required to prepare. And depending on what kind of account you're invested in, you may get one of those for every company you have money invested in, even through your 401k. And those generally, if you are not a professional level investor, you're going to have a hard time making sense of them, and you're not legally required to keep prospectuses for any reason. So that's
Right.
one fairly chunky and bulky category that you can probably let go. If it's labeled as a prospectus, you can hand it off to your financial advisor if you have one, and recycle it if you don't. And if you
Right.
don't see yourself learning to read prospectuses anytime soon.
Well, and if you're not the person who is making the judgment calls about the contents, if you're involved in a fund or you're paying a financial advisor to make investment decisions, then, they send those prospectuses because they're assuming that whoever's doing the buying is making decisions, and they inform decisions based on data. And sure, a financial advisor is doing that. They're reading those prospectuses, they're keeping up. But that's why you pay the expert, because you don't want to become that expert. If you are an investor who yourself singly, who is paying attention and doing that research, then great, you might be reading those things. But if you're not the person directing the choices, then you don't need to read about all those businesses. You're paying somebody else to do that and keep up. And so those are easy things to say, yeah, not part of my life. I'm paying somebody else to be smart about that.
On the topic of making sure you know what you have, Connie says, when I tidied up the box with wrapping paper, I found so much I don't need any more for the rest of my life.
Right? Sometimes just touching everything at once makes you realize how big the collection is, right? There you go.
And Rejoice says, what's even nicer is signing up for the e-version of prospectuses. So much easier to delete.
Right? It does not require walking to the recycle bin. There you go.
My advisor sends frequent summaries. And Barbara added, re 401k mail, I was able to change the delivery so that my statements come by snail mail, but the annual reports and prospectuses come via email. A lot easier.
It's a category you can
manage.
separate.
Yeah. And Sumudu says you have to know what the expert is called: accountant, lawyer, senior services. That's going to depend on what your situation is and what kind of stuff you've got.
Right. And financial paperwork, it depends on how involved your financial stuff is. It always default to a financial advisor if you have one, an accountant if you have one. And in relationship to the legal stuff, it depends on what kind of legal stuff that it is. I will say, if you have a divorce decree, keep it forever, because you're going to have to prove it a million times over. For some reason, lots of people get in situations where even though they've been divorced for 30 years, they still have to prove it with a divorce decree. So, but there's lots of paperwork related to real estate transactions. For instance, when you buy and sell properties, that's usually a ton of paperwork, by the way. And we keep the paperwork for the things that we own, but then when we sell them after they're gone and it's all settled out and the tax year has gone by where the sale is reported, then, I think we're reluctant to give away shred that big pile of paper, except that you really can. When it's no longer a property owned by you, it really doesn't matter that you used to own it. It only matters while you own it. And so there's paperwork related to that can go.
And if you took a profit or a loss on the sale, there's a certain
amount of that. It's part of the tax return, right?
Right. You have to
account for that.
Support the tax return, but that's it.
But that's like, The piece that supports the tax return is the HUD-1, the settlement statement. It's that one document where they do all the calculation of sale price and all that mess that you have to figure out. And then all the other millions of pieces of paper that go with the legal transfer of the property from this person to that person and paying off the loan and whatever else happened can all be shredded once the property's gone. Keep the one or two pieces of paper that say the loan was paid in full, just in case. But there's all kinds of things related to the legal transfer of real property that becomes moot when you don't own the property anymore. You keep a fraction, you'll end up keeping a fraction of what you got from the title company, is what I'm saying.
Let's circle back real quick to, I don't know who to give it to.
I don't know who to give it to. You don't really have to know specifically. You can instead pick a charity or a service outreach program that you trust and give it to them, and then trust whomever you give things to distribute them where they'll be most useful. You really don't have to know specifically where it can go. You can just pick someone else to distribute it on your behalf.
This trips up a lot of people. I saw this a lot in the responses. And I think it has to do with that. We talked before about the endowment effect. You know, something that is yours becomes special and noteworthy because it's yours. And I think that effect is what makes us feel like, oh, well, I have to make sure this goes to a good home. I have to make sure this goes to a worthy recipient and
a special place.
Yeah. And you really don't, unless it's a family thing and you want it to stay in the family. For the most part, you can give your stuff away and just, like we said earlier, have a little faith that the right person will get it.
And that you don't have to be the director of that. You can just trust that it will work out somewhere down the road and not worry about it. Give it to a charity that you trust. Give it to, like I said, find a donation recipient organization that you feel comfortable with their mission. You feel comfortable with what services they're providing, whatever you need to do to feel comfortable, and then just give it to them and cede the distribution responsibility to whoever receives your donation, and let that be enough.
All right, let's talk about time constraints. C says, no time to dedicate constantly to the project without getting tired and having to pack back up and keep starting over.
I think this happens sometimes because we pull out more than we can handle in one sitting. Pulling out everything when we won't be able to get through it all means putting back what hasn't been addressed. So it's better to grab a small bundle of things to work on, like we talked about earlier. If you can get through it and you still want to work, you can go back for more. But starting with a smaller portion means less to pull out and less to put back. And so you're not spending as much time moving things around just so you can work. You're looking for the sweet spot, the amount of time that you can comfortably work and the amount of stuff that you can handle in that time, while also allowing the time for putting the project away again. Maybe I can suggest keeping a cheat sheet with the project materials on which you write down tips to help yourself get started again. The steps you're following, maybe you say the next step that needs action, and having worked for an hour and a half or something, you can say the next thing I need to do is this, and just make yourself a note and stick it back where the project stuff is to remind you, so you don't even have to figure it out. You can just tell yourself after your work is done what the next step should be. You can always go get more. Like I said, you can always go get more. If it goes faster than you think, you can go grab another handful, but you can't set up the entire project when it's a project that was going to not get done in one sitting. You can't pull out everything and work on it and then have to put everything back without spending a whole lot of time just in motion. So grab the small bite, work on it. You'll have less to put back if you don't get it all done. And if you do get it done, you can go get another little small amount and repeat. And hopefully you'll end up with a keep pile that you're going to go put away. You're going to end up with things that need to be trash, recycled, donated, and those can be moved forward and out of the house. And you're that 2 or 3 steps farther down the road from where you started. And then every time you go in there, you're going to grab your small part and keep going. And in the meantime, the rest of it just sits and waits its turn. So it comes out of the room when you're ready to address it. And that way you can get through it without putting a whole bunch of effort into moving everything around.
David, who is watching on Facebook, I shared a link to an Andrew Mellon TED Talk video. So I'm going to take a look at that later on and put that in the show notes since it sounds like it's relevant to the conversation about your grandmother's teacup.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Let's talk about sunk costs. We've talked about this before. Catherine shared that her ex-husband, who left in 2021, believed in keeping years of food in storage. She says, now the canned food has expired. Yeah, I keep using it. It's canned. I hardly use the grains or the huge bags of dried fruit and nuts. I can't bring myself to waste the money spent on food, even though the food itself is probably already wasted.
I'm wanting to remind you that the money for that extra food is sunk costs. That money has been spent, and beyond using the food, there's no recouping the funds. You might want to look for ways to donate some for use now. And if you won't eat the food and dried fruit, it's time to find a way to pass it on to others. There's no point in storing food and watching it slowly become useless. And I'm a little concerned about the dried nuts. Even dried nuts can get rancid over time. Yeah. Depends on how they're packaged and sealed. And I'm like, yeah, they last, but they don't last forever.
Yeah, anything with a lot of fat will get rancid.
Right. It's going to turn bad. So don't forget that although canned food may last for years beyond its expiration date, you still need to be careful. At the very least, eliminate cans that look rusted or dented or swollen, which means that something is, happening, right? So since you have volumes of stuff that you're not going to eat, I think now is the time to go take those, like the grains and the dried fruits and stuff. If you think that they're still edible, then I would go look for a food bank that is trying to use them. They can use them right now. Go look for a church, a meal distribution program, like anybody that is making and serving meals in vast quantities for people.
Refugee program.
Yeah, anything like that. Go and donate those things away and let them feed somebody. If they're not stuff that you would eat anyway, and certainly more than one person could eat alone, then it's time to go and put those in front of somebody who's going to dish out a whole bunch of meals all at once and let that food get used. It's a much better use of the money that you spent to feed someone that needs it than to hold on to it and watch it slowly die in front of you and become useless. And so the money is sunk. You're not getting the money back. So you can either decide to eat it or decide to donate the food away and do it quickly before it can't be eaten by anybody else.
Okay, I want to skip ahead to the issue of complexity, Gayle.
Okay.
Sheila wrote that paper and photographs make her fatigued, especially some for which it's hard to decide how to arrange them in order to support my book writing.
Yeah, this is an area that calls for bigger buckets. If the papers that you'll use to write your book are mixed in with other papers, then you just want to start by separating them from everything else. So take whatever collection of papers are in a bundle and an unsorted bundle and separate. This goes with my book. This doesn't go with my book. That's the first step. And then sort them into a few folders or containers in as few folders or containers as you can get away with. Start with something very simple, and you can always fine tune it later, but you don't want to organize in deep detail, and you don't want that need to get it all organized get in your way in terms of creating the clear space you need to work on the book. And so really large categories takes a completely unmanageable pile to something that at least has some focus to it. These are photographs related to my family. These are not photographs related to my family. This is paper that is about the book. This is paper that isn't about the book. There may be some larger categories of paper types that are in there. Maybe there's letters, maybe there's research material. I'm making up categories in my head as we have this conversation, but the idea being that even a little bit of organization a little bit will be supportive and helpful to you, so that if you know that all the newspaper articles are in a pile, even though you don't know what the newspaper articles are about, when you need a newspaper article in your mind, you can go to that pile and flip through until you find them, what you're looking for. If you know you need a specific photograph and all the photographs are split up between family and not family, and then you can go look in the family pile. It just narrows down the searching that you have to do when you're looking for things if you start with bigger buckets. Don't try to organize it really in great detail. And some of the categories may come up as you work on the book, as you're writing. It may become, okay, here's all the newspaper articles, but I need these newspaper articles to be broken up into 3 different categories, 3 different types of articles, 3 different topics of articles. And so you can come back and separate that into the 3 separate piles that you might use as you work on the book. You can always get more elaborate if you need to, but you can usually spend less time and still support yourself by choosing really big categories and just a few big categories to start with, and sort everything into those big piles. And then as you work, you can dig into those piles and find out if now they need to be sorted to something smaller, or if they're good enough for you to go flip through and find what you want without too much trouble and get back to your writing. I think that's the best I can say about it. It focused, less is more, the less categories right now. And if you have to add more later, you can.
Don't add complexity if you don't have to.
Up front, exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk about grief.
Okay.
Kathy Ann wrote, I think the largest obstacle is just in facing the fact that some of the items to which I have an emotional attachment are no longer relevant. That season of life is over and a new one is present. Sometimes I think there is a bit of grief over leaving a season of life you loved. Therefore, I would rather avoid facing the items until I have resolved my feelings and can look back fondly on the prior era. This can take some time, probably more than I would like it to take.
It is hard to let go of a past season of your life, and waiting for your emotions to fully resolve can delay the clear out process. You might consider that going through the items might actually help you resolve your feelings earlier, since they'll serve as prompts to examine your experiences. It is a process of letting go. I no longer play soccer. I no longer ski. I used to be a teacher, and now it's, et cetera, et cetera. I understand I transitioned from being an accountant to being an organizer, and I had things related to my old career. And there was some difficulty at the time of letting go of some of that stuff. But you get into the next season, and then your life becomes about what you're doing right now. And so thinning down the things that aren't important anymore, or aren't current is the better word to use, that things that aren't current for you anymore, thinning it down to a representative sample, keeping the cream of the crop, not the entire population, can help you move along. Go and take the 25% or the 20% or the 10% of stuff that's really reminds you or is useful around or supports that old process, that old focus, that old interest, and let the rest of it go away. Someday you'll be able to get rid of all of it. But if you can at least thin it down to the most valuable pieces and still be processing how you feel about letting go of that experience, that time of your life, you can keep the smaller sample, and even so someday come circle back to that stuff and let it go too. But don't wait to be fully resolved before you try to start moving things along.
Charity, who's with us on Facebook, shared a comment that's really relevant to this discussion. Charity says, just realize why it is so hard to release wedding crystal when we have no place to access it in the downsizing of the last few years. The crystal represents the hopes and dreams I had a few decades ago. Life has taken us to more remote adventures rather than elegant dinner parties. When I had a bigger dining room, we had easy access to use the crystal for all our celebratory dinners. We are planning to downsize again, but having a large dining room might just be on, I think she might be saying might not just be on the shopping list. Discovering the reasons behind my submerged thinking really assists in the mental processing and next actions I could take. I would
Right.
rather release the crystal than climb up and down a ladder every time I need it.
Right. And you can also, I always remind people, you can break up the set. If you had place settings for 12 and you're never going to house a dinner party for 12 again because you're never going to have a dining room that big, you can keep place settings for 4 or 6 and let half the collection go or 2/3 of the collection go and still be able to imagine your dream of having people over and having the table be nice and pleasant. And if you feel like that kind of dining, that style of sit down, fancy place setting dining has passed in your life, it's not part of who you are now, then you can bless it and kiss it and send it on to the next person that wants to have that. It's part of our starter set, right? Like we buy crystal and china and silverware, and it's like the starter set of our life and our family. But then, life happens and we go along our road, and all of the things that we focus on change and shift and grow depending on what's going on in our lives. And those things, they don't survive into the next iteration of your life. And that's okay. They can be sent on.
Okay, I want to touch on two more quick things before we wrap up. One is negative emotions associated with the organizing process itself. Summer wrote, emotions, dread to start the project and experience the sadness, loss, and anger it brings up.
Fear of the expected emotions that might come up stops a lot of people from going in. I'm often the one who opens up the distressing box of things to get someone started on items that have emotional baggage. From my experience of 16 years, most of the time, the emotional response is much less powerful than what the client has built up in their mind. If I can get them to start looking at a few things, they usually realize that the battle was all in their mind and not so much in the box of stuff. To me, it seems like they've surrounded a box or a pile of items with a dark cloud of distress that then seems impenetrable. The box of items is lost under the cloud of expected emotions. I had a client who didn't want to open the cabinet of photos. It was like a cabinet door, double door with a shelf in the middle. So there was 2 shelves, basically, of 2-drawer cabinet. It was full of photos and videotapes and et cetera, types of photo media. And she didn't even want to open the cabinet. I discussed it with her several times, trying to get her started on the cabinet, and she always resisted. But suddenly her grown daughter needed a photo of her grandfather for something related to school. And that need was enough to get my client diving into the cabinet. She found enough motivation. She could face it. She could face the cabinet. And once she got started, it wasn't that bad after all. She could plow through her own emotional cloud to get in action. And she successfully got into the cabinet and started sorting through the photographs. That process of anticipating a lot of negative emotion, it isn't that we're actually having them. It's that we're anticipating that we're going to have them. And my experience, and you just have to trust me on this, most of the time when I open a box that people have sort of been like, oh God, don't open it. Don't make me look. It's going to be awful. It's going to be awful. If they're having that response, they just need a little support to dive in. And it's never been as bad as they imagined that it would be. I have never had a client who said, see, I told you I'm sobbing and miserable and this is awful and I hate it. And I'm so sorry that we opened this box. Like, no one has ever said that to me. And that should tell you something. It isn't because all my clients are super fabulous and able to process their emotions. It's because their anticipation of how bad it was going to be in no way matched the reality of what it was when we actually did the work. And so just know that your mind is messing with you right now. Your mind is playing games with you. And it may be sad and you may cry and it may bring up stuff that you don't really want to think about much, but you can still do it and still feel some emotion and still make some headway, still get rid of some stuff and get on the other side of it. And it won't be as bad as you are telling yourself it's going to be right now. I can't say that you will have no emotional response, because of course that isn't true. You may have some, but it won't be nearly as bad as you're inflating it in your mind. And hopefully with that promise, you can try. You can dive in. And again, if it's something that's miserable and terrible, if you think it's going to be bad, don't do the whole box. Do a portion of the box. Do what we always say. Go get a handful of something and deal with that handful and see how it goes. You don't have to touch everything in there at once if you don't want to. Open the box, grab a handful, take it out, deal with it, see what happens. It won't be as bad as you think, I promise.
Okay, I lied. I said we were going to cover 2 more things, but you covered 1 more thing so thoroughly. We're not going to cover 2 more things. That's okay. That's okay. And the reason it's okay is that the next topic was going to be about creative imagination. I'll read the comment, and then we'll save your answer for next time. Okay. Diana wrote, craft stuff. I'm still in the mode of I might use that, although I probably won't. These things represent possibilities to me. So that segues neatly to our talking about next week. There's a Chinese proverb that says, before undertaking her craft, the artisan first sharpens her tools. Since art and craft tools and supplies ranked in the top 5 categories with which our audience struggles, and also since Gayle just got back from a crafty weekend, seems like a great time to revisit this popular topic. Join us next week, September 12th, 2023, at the usual time, for Sharpen Your Tools, how to organize for arts, crafts, and hobbies.
I just spent, a weekend with 100 other crafty people. So I had lots of great conversations over the weekend. It's so funny how people, they want to talk to me about it when I show up at a retreat. So we're going to talk about it some more next week.
All right. Why don't you give us the tittle?
Okay. This week's tittle, not because they're easy, but because they're hard. This week's assignment is the same as last week's. If you've already tried it, we're encouraging you to go through the steps again for another category of stuff. We're asking you to examine a tough decluttering decision to see what you can learn from it about yourself. Identify a category of stuff in which you experience difficulty or discomfort as you work to declutter and organize. Select one item from that category and pick something for which you're struggling to make a decision to keep it or toss it. Write down 3 reasons why you'd like to keep it. Write down 3 reasons why you should let the thing go, and then set the item in the list aside to revisit later in the week, and reflect on whether anything has changed in your thinking about this item. Yes, we're giving you the same tittle because we're coming from the same topic place today, but we thought it was a good exercise for you to examine and think about what's the stuff that's hanging you up. And if you think about why you want to keep it and think about why it would be good to let it go, maybe you can make some movement in your thought process about it and understand a little bit more about why you're keeping it and it's hanging you up. So do a little bit and let us know how it goes.
If you're watching this on YouTube, we would love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. You can also follow us on Facebook by visiting cfhou.com/Facebook, or join our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. We love to hear from you, so please keep your questions, comments, and topic suggestions coming on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere that you find us. And you can always reach us through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I appreciate you so much. I wish you could have been with us on the retreat this weekend. I hope you got to do something fun and relaxing on Labor Day weekend. And we will be back next week working hard on organizing.
Oops, I said bye-bye too soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.